Alright, students, welcome to the next lesson in chapter 7c of our bivariate data chapter. And before we go into this lesson, let's quickly recap the previous lesson where we learnt how to interpret scatter plots and how we construct them. So in terms of interpreting scatter plots, remember that when you see the word association, so when he asks you to describe the association, you're going to be describing these three items: direction, form, and strength. So direction on a scatter plot refers to which way the dots or the scatter plot is going. Positive, okay, means it's going upwards like this. Negative means it's going downwards like this. Form talks about whether the graph or the scatter plot is linear or non-linear. Linear means if you can put an imaginary straight line through the dots, it is linear, like so. Non-linear means there might be a pattern, but you can't really put a straight line. See, this line will be curved, so it's non-linear. And no association means the dots are just random, so you can't really put a line anywhere. The third thing to mention is a strength, and your three options are strong, moderate, and weak. So when it comes to strength, you're just describing how closely compacted the scatter plots is. So if you look at the dots here, you can see that this is considered strong, okay, because you can see that the dots are pretty close. They almost form a straight line. Moderate means they're a little bit more spread out, but still obvious that you can put a straight line through it. And weak is when it's hardly noticeable, or it's a little bit trickier to put a straight line through because the dots are quite scattered and it's hard to tell what the direction is. But that's how we describe the association of a scatter plot. Okay, and obviously, again, as I mentioned before, if a graph looks like the dots are scattered all over the place, there is no association. Okay, so 7c, which is the chapter we're at now, is more or less just that. Okay, so the features that we need to look for in a scatter plot will help us identify and describe any association. So what are the features? Well, we'll look if there's a clear pattern. For example, in here, there is no clear pattern. Therefore, we can't really talk about the association. But if you can see that a graph, okay, for example, might look like this, a scatter plot looks like this, okay, then there is some sort of clear association because the dots are going towards a linear sort of direction. Okay, let's keep going. So here you can see these graphs have some sort of association, such as this one. So does this one, although it is curved. So does this one. Okay, there is some sort of association with it. So as we mentioned before, when it comes to describing the association, we're looking at direction, form, and strength. Remember, for direction, okay, you've only got two options. Okay, you've got positive and you've got negative. Okay, for form, you've got linear, non-linear. And obviously, if a graph, a scatter plot, is pretty much random, you would write no association. I don't need that. And for strength, you've got three options: strong, moderate, and you've got weak. Okay, so moving on, direction of the association. Okay, for example, for these ones, pretty straightforward. I can see that this is positive. It's going upwards. This next one here, negative. Okay, no, it's going downwards. And the last one here, no association. There's no clear direction where the lines are going. Okay. Next here, we classify whether these are positive, negative, or no association. So these are positive because it's going upwards. This one should be negative. It's going downwards. And this last one should be a tricky one. I would say this one's probably it is going this way sideways, but then you've always also got this outlier here. In this case, I would probably say no association. Okay, also if you look at the actual variables, okay, age and diameter in terms of, I'm assuming, calf diameter, doesn't really change when it comes to age. So even if you're 21 compared to when you're 33, for example, there's not really a big change in someone's calf diameter. So not really any association there. Although you could say it is possibly linear. Okay. So like I said, for the direction of an association, if you just read this section here, it says two variables are have a positive association when the value of the RV, so the response variable, tends to increase as the value of the EV also increases. So what that's saying is a graph that looks something like this, where, for example, the EV in the RV here. So as the EV increases, so does the RV, as you can see with the dots. Okay, so if you go increase on the EV, it also goes up on the RV, which means that there is a positive association. Okay. With a graph that has a negative association, okay, you can see that the RV, oops, so the RV will tend to, sorry guys, RV will tend to decrease, so the response variable will tend to decrease as the EV also decreases. Oh, sorry, as the EV increases. Okay, what that's saying is as you increase with the EV, so if I have my graph here, EV and RV, so as you go more and more with the EV, okay, you can see that the graph or the dots tend to go lower and lower. So that's negative association. Okay, last one. Two variables have no association when there is no consistent change in value of the RV and the values as the values of the EV increase. So an example of that could be just something really random, like you might have a graph that looks just random like this. So if you have your EV, RV, and there's no real consistent obvious change that is happening, then there is no association. Form, okay, as I said, is whether the graph is linear or non-linear. So when it comes to linear, okay, it means you can put a straight line through it. So this would be linear. Okay, this one here, actually, you can kind of put a straight line, but it looks like the line sort of curves a bit more, like so. So I would say this is non-linear. Okay, so when it comes to form, you're generally looking for whether the graph is able to have a straight line. Okay, so when it's linear, it'll have a straight line. If it's non-linear, okay, it'll normally follow a curved line. Okay, or at least something else where there's no clear straight line. So some examples here. This graph would be considered as linear. Okay, because you can see that there's a straight line that you can put through. And this graph here would be a curve like that, so it's non-linear. Okay, strength. So strength is talking about how closely the dots are together. So all of these graphs would be considered to be strong, okay, because they're very, very close to each other. Moderate means they're a little bit more spread out. So you can see there that these graphs or these dots, you can still kind of see there's a line that goes through. Okay, but they are all a little bit more spread out. So these are considered moderate. Okay. And weak means the dots are further apart and it's very difficult or somewhat difficult to tell which way they're going. Although you can still tell that this one goes up This one sort of curves like that. This one goes in the negative direction. Okay. And obviously, as I mentioned before, no association means dots are just in random spots, like so. Okay, so you would say that these have no association. So once you've done that, complete chapter 7c, questions 1 and 2. Thank you.